that, we'll go ahead and turn time to Jordan to give us an update on the snow report.
All right, thank you very much for having me. As you just alluded to, I obviously just gave an update yesterday morning down in St. George, but I have largely overlapping content, but a couple new bits of information for anyone that may not have been down there. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Excellent. I'll go ahead and jump in. So this is as of last night at midnight. So this is a couple days more recent than what I showed in St. George. It's basically the same, but there are a couple of subtle changes. The same story applies. The northern portion of Utah is about 80 to 85% of normal, depending on which basin you look in. The Tooele area is a little bit lower. This, of course, is our snow water equivalent levels. This is the amount of water that's stored in our snowpack currently around the state. Most of the rest of the state is close to normal in those green categories, and you can see the individual snowtel sites have some variation, but that's largely what the picture is that we're looking at across the state. The statewide snow water equivalent number is up to 89%. That's 1% higher than what I presented yesterday morning. Obviously, this is still basically the same story. Our current conditions are shown on the black line there, and normal conditions are shown with the green line, so we're below normal for this time of year. When we consider the statewide snow water equivalent, we're currently at about 12 inches. We're really only about 0.4 of an inch higher than we were last year at this time. As I mentioned yesterday as well, there were, of course, more factors that impacted our poor runoff last year. Snowpack was only one of them, but it's disappointing that our snowpack has ended up basically the same as it was last year, right around the time of peak sweep. Projections from here forward, we have about 12 days until we typically get our peak snow water equivalent, peak SWE. Our most probable projection is the middle strand of the spaghetti there, which would suggest around another 1/2 inch of SWE added on to what we currently have, around 12.5 total, which would again leave us at about 88% of normal. That's very consistent with what I said yesterday morning. Precipitation is also trending almost exactly on the normal line. You can see the current water year is shown with the black line there relative to the normal conditions, which are the green line on the left side there. That's for the entire state of Utah. Now, of course, there's some variation regionally. Northern portion of Utah, the Bear and Weber, for example, are a little bit below normal. Other areas of the state are doing a little bit better relative to normal precip. And of course, a couple portions of the state, again, Tooele and the Escalante area are a little bit below where they need to be. Statewide reservoir levels are not updated until the beginning of next month. So this is old information at this point. This is the same as what I mentioned yesterday at the water users meeting. We'll have new numbers for this around April 3rd or 4th, depending on when we can get everything compiled for our reports. But on the left side here, you can see the current percent capacity for each one of these major basins in Utah, shown with the blue bars. Last year is shown with the green. And there's a few areas of the state, particularly the Price, the Upper Sevier, and the Bear that have dropped down significantly from last year. Other areas of the state are also down quite a bit, like southwestern Utah, Weber, Ogden, and a couple other areas. On the right side here shows all the major reservoirs in the state of Utah. The size of the circles is proportional to the size of the reservoir itself and how much capacity it has. And then they're colored by how full they are, with the yellow colors being half full, green and blue being 75 and 100% full, and vice versa for orange and red. You can see some of our really large reservoirs are doing well, like Strawberry. Others are hurting, like the Sevier Bridge, Yuba, Paiute, Otter Creek, Joe's Valley are all quite low. Schofield, Pine View, definitely not where we want those to be. Statewide, we're at 53% of capacity. At least we were at the beginning of March. I'm expecting that number to be just a little bit higher. We'll see when we get the new numbers. Anyway, we're at 53% of capacity as of March 1st. That's down 14% from last year. And as I mentioned yesterday, I plotted all of the percent capacity numbers going back about 5-6 years here. So you can see 2021 With the blue line, you can see 2022 with the red line, how much we are reduced from that. And from a management perspective, right now we're trending very, very closely to the 2016 reservoir levels, at least statewide. Soil moisture is very similar to the story I just gave yesterday. We're about 25% improved from last year. Things have started to dry out a little bit more in some of our headwaters areas. The Raft, Lower Severe, Tooele areas are all a little bit down from what I presented yesterday. A couple other areas of the state, southeastern Utah, but most areas of the state are still above normal for this time of year, and that does hopefully bode well for our snowmelt runoff. We would like to see more of the water that's stored in the snowpack actually make it to our streams and reservoirs this year, because it sure didn't last year. So speaking of our forecasts, I spent a lot of time on this at the meeting yesterday. I'll really just touch on it today. Our runoff forecasts are pretty pessimistic for the April through July runoff period. You can see this is colored by percent normal. The actual runoff values are available on our website, but that'd be kind of hard to go through all of those in a meeting like this. But you can see from a percent normal, we're comparing to average conditions, that we're looking at 50 to 70% for large portions of the state, other portions of the state closer to 70 to 90% of normal, and then a couple pockets less than 50% of normal runoff, such as the middle and lower severe. Definitely an area where we did not want to see that, where we already have a reservoir system in the severe that's been drawn down significantly. As I mentioned yesterday, we can go through this for each sub-basin in the state. We're not going to do that, but I wanted to just highlight this again real quickly. These forecast locations are shown with charts like these, and the middle value on these distributions shows the most likely outcome. So for South Willow Creek near Grantsville, the middle one there, that middle value is 1.6 thousand acre feet. That's our most probable outcome. Of course, there's a range of possible outcomes, and you can see what percent of normal those outcomes are by comparing against the x-axis, where the vertical gray line represents normal. So all of these flows are anticipated to be well below normal for this area, the Tooele Valley West Desert area. And as I mentioned, you can receive all of these forecasts, all these charts on our webpage by following the link that says Streamflow Forecast and following the links below. SWASI numbers, surface water supply index numbers, are also a monthly parameter that we'll update as soon as we have new numbers at the beginning of April. The SWASIs for major basins in Utah are all quite low. Not all of them, but the majority of them are quite low, with the majority of them actually below the 25th percentile, which is not where we want to be. That, of course, is a combination of the anticipation of poor predicted runoff, and also depleted reservoir storage. So this is something to watch. This gives us, again, an assessment of how much water we anticipate to have available in these basins for the summer period, and it compares it to previous years from a management perspective that are hopefully useful. I wanted to show this chart again. This compares our SWASIs from this March 1st report to last year's March 1st report. And you can see some areas where there's been some improvement and some other areas where there's been some degradation. So for the Ogden and the Provo, for example, we have a significant degradation in our anticipated water supply. Same for the lower severe. Other areas we see improvement. Moab, for example, the Virgin, for example, Western Uintas are all areas where we see likely improvement. I know Glenn talked about drought yesterday. I'm not going to get into much more than just to offer that we're still at 97% of the state at D2 level drought or worse, with about 33% of the state in that extreme D3 category. So this is definitely still a prevailing condition. This map hasn't changed for several months at this point, but it'll probably start changing here soon as we start to dry out our snowpack. This is a pretty optimistic precipitation outlook for the next 6 to 10 days. I'm not going to show what Glenn showed yesterday, which is the seasonal outlook for April, May, and June, because that's too depressing. And so I'm just going to stick to the 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook, because this is what we want to see. I'm going to keep my head in the sand on that one. And then I did not present on this yesterday. I thought I would offer up to this group, however, a couple things that we are seeing at our SNOTEL sites. I've been asked about this for 5 to 10 years now, and we're at the point now where we can say with some confidence that we're seeing some impacts from a changing climate and a changing snowpack regime. And so if we highlight different elevation areas, one of the things that we are seeing for our medium elevation sites, we're seeing the length of the snowpack season shortening. The increase in percent rain versus snow is starting to show up again in our data, which is all expected from what the models have suggested would happen. For our high elevation areas, these are of course less affected by temperature increases. They tend to be a little bit more insulated from those kinds of effects, but we have seen increases in snow density, a little bit more increases in snow density than we would have anticipated based on the fact that there's such high elevation sites, which is leading to earlier ripening dates of the snowpack. Snowpack is ready to melt earlier in the season than would have been anticipated. I think everyone in this call is probably aware of the increased interannual variability in our snowpack conditions. Over the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen some real extremes. 2011 and 2017, for example, really good snowpack years, some really seriously poor snowpack years in between those good ones. And so that's been challenging our ability to dictate what an average year looks like, because we haven't seen a lot of average years. There has been a little bit of a decreasing trend in statewide SWE. And then, of course, I think we're all aware of the low lake level of the Great Salt Lake. There's a couple snowpack related impacts there. One is the increased potential for dust on snow, which would decrease the reflectivity of the snowpack and make it easier to melt. And also the decreased lake effect, which helps support snow, particularly in the canyons, the Cottonwood canyons, by about probably around 8 to 12% of their annual snow budget. That's all I have today. I kept it kind of brief. Of course, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jordan. Are there any questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, a question for
Go ahead.
Jordan. When you were earlier on in the report, you were showing information on reservoir storage. I noticed there was not a circle at Bear Lake. Is that included in that earlier report, or Woodruff Narrows Reservoir?
Yeah, that's a good point. Woodruff Narrows is not included in this. Bear Lake is, or I should say Bear Lake is not obviously on this map, but it is included in the statistics that I was showing. So on this presentation, this 53% of capacity does include Woodruff Narrows, and it does include Bear Lake. I apologize for that discrepancy.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yep.
Any other questions of the board? Thank you, Jordan. We appreciate that update, and we'll let you go ahead and see if you can drum up some more snow somewhere.
We'll do my best.
Okay, thank
you.
you.